are several methods for cutting square holes in panel doors. Firstly, you can use a mortiser and chisel. 1. Mark the outline of the square hole in the door. 2. Drill small pilot holes along the outline using a drill bit slightly smaller than the width of the chisel. 3. Use a mortiser to remove the material within the outline, leaving a rectangular recess. 4. Use a flat chisel to square up the corners and smooth the surfaces. Secondly, you can use a router. 1. Create a square or rectangular template with the desired hole size. 2. Clamp the template to the door, aligning the whole outline. 3. Install a straight bit in the router that is slightly smaller than the template's thickness. 4. Guide the router along the template, cutting out the square hole. 5. Use a chisel or sanding block to fine-tune the shape and smooth the edges. Thirdly, a CNC router can be used. 1. Use design software to create a file that defines the square hole shape and dimensions. 2. Import the design file into a CNC router software program. 3. Clamp the door securely to the CNC bed. 4. Install a straight cutting bit and configure the machine's settings. 5. Start the CNC router and follow the programmed path cutting out the square hole. Here are some tips to keep in mind. Use a sharp blade or bit to achieve clean cuts. Clamp the workpiece securely to prevent vibrations. Take shallow depth cuts and repeat the process to ensure precision. Protect the adjacent surfaces from scratches or damage. If the hole is large, consider reinforcing the edges with wood blocks or filler. Each method has advantages and disadvantages. The mortiser and chisel method is suitable for smaller holes and requires manual skill. The router method is faster and more accurate with a template. The CNC router method is the most precise and automated, but it requires specialized equipment and software. When choosing a method, consider the size and number of holes you need to cut, the materials of the panel door, and the available tools and expertise. For the mortiser and chisel method, select a mortiser that is appropriate for the thickness of the panel door. Ensure the chisel is sharp and the correct size for the corners of the square hole. When drilling pilot holes, use a drill bit that is slightly smaller than the chisel to prevent the chisel from wandering. When using a router, select a straight bit that is slightly smaller than the template's thickness to avoid damaging the template. Use a router table for better control and accuracy. Make multiple passes with shallow cuts to prevent tear out and ensure a clean edge. When using a CNC router, create a precise design file that accurately reflects the dimensions of the square hole. Select the appropriate cutting bit and feed rate for the material of the panel door. Secure the panel door to the CNC bed to prevent movement during the cutting process. Always wear appropriate safety gear, including eye protection and hearing protection, when using power tools. Before starting any cutting operation, double-check the measurements and alignment of the template or design. Use a marking knife or awl to create a precise outline of the square hole. This will help to prevent the router or chisel from wandering. When cutting the square hole, work slowly and carefully to avoid making mistakes. If you are using a router, move the router in a clockwise direction to prevent tear out. If you are using a chisel, hold the chisel at a slight angle to the workpiece to prevent the chisel from digging in. After cutting the square hole, inspect the edges for any imperfections. Use a sanding block or file to smooth any rough edges or burrs. If the square hole is too large, you can fill the gap with wood filler or epoxy. Allow the filler to dry completely before sanding it smooth. If the square hole is too small, you can use a router or chisel to enlarge it. Work slowly and carefully to avoid making the hole too large. When reinforcing the edges of the square hole, use wood blocks or filler that is compatible with the material of the panel door. Secure the wood blocks with screws or glue. Allow the glue to dry completely before sanding the blocks smooth. When working with metal panel doors, use cutting fluids or lubricants to prevent the metal from overheating and warping. Select cutting tools that are designed for use with metal. When working with plastic panel doors, use a low-speed router or saw to prevent the plastic from melting or cracking. Select cutting tools that are designed for use with plastic. When cutting square holes in panel doors, it is important to take your time and work carefully. With the right tools and techniques, you can create precise and professional-looking results. Remember to always prioritize safety and wear appropriate protective gear. In addition to the methods already mentioned, there are other ways to cut square holes, such as using a hole saw with a square template, or using a multi-tool with a cutting attachment. These methods may be suitable for specific situations or materials. It's important to research and select the method that best suits your needs. Always practice on scrap material before cutting into the final panel door. This will allow you to refine your technique and ensure a clean and accurate cut. When cutting large square holes, consider using a backer board to prevent tear out on the back side of the panel door. A backer board is a piece of material that is clamped or taped to the back of the panel door to provide support during the cutting process. When cutting square holes in metal panel doors, be aware of the potential for sharp edges or burrs. Use a deburring tool or file to remove any sharp edges after cutting. When cutting square holes in painted or finished panel doors, take extra care to avoid damaging the surrounding finish. Use masking tape to protect the finish and work slowly and carefully to avoid chipping or scratching the paint. If you are cutting multiple square holes in the same panel door, consider creating a jig or fixture to ensure consistent placement and alignment of the holes. A jig or fixture can be made from wood or metal and will help to speed up the cutting process and improve accuracy. Before installing any devices or components in the square holes, double-check the fit and alignment. Make any necessary adjustments to ensure a proper fit. When installing devices or components in the square holes, use appropriate fasteners and hardware. Follow the manufacturer's instructions for installation. After completing the installation, inspect the panel door for any damage or defects. Repair any damage as needed. When working with electrical enclosures or control panels, always follow proper safety procedures and disconnect the power before performing any work. Consult with a qualified electrician if you are unsure about any aspect of the electrical system. Properly ground all electrical components and enclosures to prevent electrical shock. Use appropriate wiring methods and materials for the application. Ensure that all wiring and connections are properly insulated and protected. Label all wiring and components clearly for easy identification. Keep electrical enclosures and control panels clean and free of debris. Regularly inspect electrical enclosures and control panels for any signs of damage or deterioration. Repair or replace any damaged components as needed. Follow all applicable electrical codes and regulations. When working with hazardous materials, such as chemicals or solvents, follow proper safety procedures and wear appropriate personal protective equipment. Dispose of hazardous materials properly in accordance with local regulations. Keep a well-stocked first aid kit on hand in case of accidents. Be aware of the potential hazards associated with the tools and materials you are using. Take necessary precautions to prevent accidents and injuries. If you are not comfortable performing any of the tasks described above, seek assistance from a qualified professional. Remember that safety should always be your top priority.